How often do you truly observe someone? I mean, give them your complete attention. You might notice a person with one eyelid that sags a tiny bit, or maybe an ear that seems a little misshapen. That seems ordinary, doesn't it? But what if you focus more intently and discover teeth that are too pointed and eyes with solid black centers? Or perhaps a face that looks more like a costume for a party? Recently, my workplace downsized and I found myself without a job. To make ends meet, I decided to rent out unused portions of my house. The upper floor had enough space for a couple of students. Then there was the ground level, a large open area covering the entire base of the structure, supported by thick stone pillars. I thought it was worth a shot to try and rent it out, as long as I was upfront about its basic nature. So I created an online listing and shared it on a few social media platforms. I included a few snapshots and hoped for the best response. The price I set was quite low, maybe lower than it should have been looking back. It was the beginning of autumn when I heard someone knocking at my front door. I hurried to open it. I was still looking at job postings on my phone and eating leftover cold pasta from the previous night. It's hard to describe how surprised I was by who was standing there. Most of the inquiries I had received were from young men or women attending the local college. But now, a family of three stood before me. A mother and father, both appearing to be in their late 30s, and a single young daughter. The mother wore a simple green dress with small flower patterns. The father had on a plain gray jacket and a light blue button-up shirt. Their daughter was dressed in a bright yellow top. The father extended his hand for a greeting. I took it. "Hello," he said with a friendly smile. "We are the Millers. We are responding to your advertisement." Welcome," I replied. "It might feel a little cramped, but feel free to take a look around. Sorry about the..." I gestured vaguely at my casual appearance, but the father just shook his head dismissively. "Not at all. We hope we are not intruding," he said. I invited them inside and they immediately walked past the staircase leading up. I assumed they had simply overlooked it. "Excuse me," I said, pointing. "It's this way." "Oh, we saw it," the mother smiled. "We are interested in the ground level." The ground level was accessed by a set of narrow metal steps leading down from the side of the house. It wasn't a pleasant space, which was why I rarely went down there or bothered to furnish it properly. The tight access made moving any substantial items down there nearly impossible. It was frustrating. Yet all three members of this seemingly ordinary family carefully made their way down, maintaining their composure. They were polite and well-mannered, showing a reasonable amount of interest. However, I couldn't help but sense that something was just unusual about them. The father pulled out a small measuring tool and began examining the walls. They asked about the lack of natural light, the ventilation, and whether they could install some storage units and perhaps a brighter overhead lamp. I agreed to all their requests. I still found it hard to believe they were genuinely considering this space. It clearly wasn't designed for a family of three, and they gave off the impression of being quite comfortable financially. There seemed to be no logical reason for them to want a space like this. As they finished their initial inspection, the mother approached me. "Would you mind going up to the main floor and walking around a little?" she asked. "We would like to hear how much sound travels." It was an odd way to inquire about soundproofing, but I complied. I went back up the steps, put on my thickest slippers, and just wandered around for a few minutes. After a short while, I walked to the edge of the open ground level access, only to see all three of them standing below, perfectly still as before, each with a wide smile on their face. "We are very happy with it," the mother announced. "We will take it." They signed a 6-month rental agreement, and I learned a bit more about them during the following weeks as they occasionally stopped by. There was Clara, the mother, Samuel, the father. Their daughter was named Sophie. They mentioned they were in the process of relocating and needed a temporary, inexpensive place to live. Despite their explanation, the choice of the ground level still felt strange to me. Nevertheless, I needed the rental income, and they were eager to finalize the arrangement. They even offered a slightly higher rent since they would be more occupants than I had initially anticipated. About a week later, they arrived for their official move-in. Clara and Samuel insisted on handling all the moving themselves, assuring me I didn't need to assist with any heavy items. They implied that simply allowing them to stay there was sufficient. They brought in several large canvas bags and numerous sealed cardboard containers. None of the containers had any labels. They also unrolled a few woven floor coverings that looked quite worn, not the type you'd typically find in a modern home. Clara mentioned she worked from home doing online design work, while Samuel was employed at a local storage facility. His work schedule was unpredictable, ranging from standard 8-hour days to overnight shifts, and often included being on call. He sometimes had to leave with very little notice. It struck me as odd that someone with such a job would choose a living space with such poor mobile phone reception. There was wireless internet, but it was unreliable. For some reason, none of these inconveniences seemed to trouble them. The first week with the Millers living on the ground level passed without incident. Most of the time, I hardly remembered they were there. I only saw them leave their space a few times, and they were remarkably quiet. At most, I could hear the faint sound of their footsteps on the metal steps, usually Samuel heading to or from work. In fact, I never saw Sophie leave for school. I assumed she was receiving lessons at home. Still, they were not disruptive. I continued my efforts to find someone to rent the upper floor, but without success. I had considered lowering the rent, but with the Millers now living downstairs, finances were becoming less of a concern. Samuel even suggested I look into job openings at his workplace. He knew someone in the hiring department. Having been unemployed for several months, I was willing to explore any opportunity. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't being entirely forthright with me. One question kept returning to my mind. What exactly were they doing down there? One afternoon, I decided to take a closer look at how they had arranged their living space. Up to that point, I hadn't even seen their decorations. It was the middle of the day, and I had no idea if they were even home. Their vehicle was not in the parking area. I knocked on the ground level access a couple of times. When there was no response, I used my spare key to go down. As I reached the bottom of the steps, it was eerily silent and completely dim. I turned on the single overhead light. They all slept on simple cots, positioned along the far wall. They had a small 2-person bench. A few basic folding chairs faced a small, outdated television set against another wall. There was a bare set of shelves, and the worn floor coverings were scattered around. I noticed a few opened containers. There was a small bathroom area, but it appeared unused. No personal items were visible. It took me a moment to realize that I wasn't alone. The entire family was standing in a line against the opposite wall, furthest from the steps. They were arranged by height, from tallest to shortest, remaining perfectly still, just looking at me. It wasn't until they noticed me observing them that they reacted. They all turned their heads slightly, offering polite smiles. "Is everything all right?" Clara asked. "We hope we weren't being too loud," Samuel added. Sophie simply nodded, in perfect sync with her parents. I looked at them carefully, but I couldn't quite grasp what I was seeing. Their behavior was inexplicable. "Sorry, I just wanted to check the water supply, I said quickly. I did knock. That's perfectly fine. Samuel smiled. Go ahead. Walking back up the steps, a thought suddenly struck me. If they were all down there, why was their vehicle gone? Who had driven it? Over the next few weeks, I had several more unsettling encounters with them. For instance, I once found Sophie standing in my kitchen. She wasn't doing anything in particular, just standing there, looking intently at the row of jars on the counter. When I asked her what she was doing, she simply said she wasn't doing anything at all. After a moment, she turned and quickly went back downstairs. I didn't see her, but I heard her light footsteps all the way down the metal steps. Another time, I saw Clara standing in the open doorway that led to their living space. She was just standing there, her hand on the door frame, looking directly at me. I said hello, and she immediately replied with hello as well. But she didn't take her eyes off me. When I finally moved out of her sight, I heard her hurrying back down the steps, not just walking quickly, running. Yet another time, I saw Samuel in his vehicle out in the parking area. I saw him from an upstairs window. He was just sitting there, his hands on the steering wheel. He remained there for at least 15 minutes. No radio playing, nothing. Just him alone in his car. But the strangest encounter occurred one evening when I went to the kitchen to get a cool drink. I saw Clara standing in the kitchen. The refrigerator door was wide open. I could see her outline illuminated by the refrigerator light. Her dark hair looked damp, as if she had just finished washing it. She was wearing a loosely tied robe and her feet were bare. At first, I didn't notice anything particularly odd. She was just standing there. She wasn't taking anything out of the refrigerator. It was more as if she was basking in the cold light. I considered calling out to her, but something about her stillness made me want to quietly retreat back to my room. Then I saw it. There was something wrong with her hand. Her left hand seemed rotated at an unnatural angle. The fingers didn't look quite right. They pointed in slightly different directions, like some of the bones were misplaced. I simply stood there for a while, observing her from a distance. I watched her shoulders gently rise and fall as she took slow breaths, as if she were inhaling the cold air. When she turned in my direction, I only caught a quick glimpse of her. Her upper body moved first, before her legs followed. Like a slightly jerky, animated figure. I managed to slip back around the corner, and I heard her quickly move back towards their living space. Her bare feet made soft, uneven sounds on the floor. When she reached the doorway, she paused. I was leaning against the wall, listening from the other room. I heard her shift her weight slightly. Then I heard a faint click. It sounded like a joint adjusting, something moving back into its proper place. Her footsteps then became more regular as she hurried down the metal steps. I remained there for a while, trying to calm myself. For all intents and purposes, I might have just seen her in a strange light. It was dim, and I was tired. And yet I couldn't dismiss the feeling that there was something unnatural about her, that I had witnessed something I wasn't meant to see. From that day forward, I became more wary. I avoided the ground-level access at night, and I did my best to simply not think about them. I refocused on finding a job and a second renter for the upper floor, both of which proved challenging. But I was making some progress. A local retail store was hiring, for example. Not my ideal work, but it would be steady. Finally, a couple of young professionals came to look at the upper floor. A man and a woman who needed a place to stay while they completed their professional certifications. They seemed pleasant enough, and we got along well. They acknowledged that the place wasn't luxurious, but it was a suitable short-term solution while they finished their current program. The only potential issue was the Miller family. I remember knocking on their access to introduce them. The young couple stood behind me. Sophie, the young daughter, called out a cheerful, "Come in." As we descended the steps, the family of three was standing in a neat triangular formation. Parents in the back, daughter in the front, all dressed in clean, simple clothing, freshly formed smiles on their faces. The whole scene felt surreal. It looked like some kind of staged photograph. "Hello," Clara said brightly. "Aren't they a lovely couple, Samuel?" "They certainly are, Clara," Samuel replied, as polite as always. For the first 20 seconds or so, a very awkward silence filled the space between us. The Millers just stood there, smiling, waiting for some kind of reaction. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something obvious. Was Clara's eye a slightly different shade? Was Sophie's smile a little too wide? Was Samuel's posture just a bit too rigid? Maybe they had always been strange. Maybe it was only now that I was truly noticing it. When we finally said our goodbyes, I followed the young couple outside. They both turned to me, their expressions serious. One of them started to speak hesitantly, but the other managed to articulate a few words. They wanted to know about the large wooden crate on the ground level. They said they saw it rock slightly. The conversation ended shortly after that, and they said they would be in touch. I had a strong feeling they wouldn't be returning anytime soon. Still, their words echoed in my mind. A crate that moved? Really? How had I missed that? I decided it was time to finally get some answers. I had to take a small risk and figure this out, once and for all. So one day I slipped a note under their access. It stated that I needed to have the ground level clear for a few hours one afternoon, while a repair person looked at some plumbing. I looked up a few basic plumbing terms online and even mentioned a fictitious repair company. I tried to make it seem official. Later that day, Clara and Samuel stopped by. They were holding hands and told me they would definitely be out for the afternoon. "Perhaps we'll visit the park," Samuel suggested with a smile. "Don't you have work?" I asked. "It comes and goes," he chuckled. "We are very fortunate." "Very fortunate," Clara echoed. "So very fortunate." At the designated time, the family left the house. They drove off in Samuel's car. They promised they wouldn't be gone for too long. I told them the repair person wouldn't need more than an hour. They seemed a little curious when they hadn't seen anyone resembling a repair person arrive. Finally, I simply fabricated a name and asked if they wanted to call him. Luckily, Clara didn't challenge my statement. But as they drove out of the parking area, I felt a sense of unease. I didn't even know exactly what I was afraid of, but my thoughts kept returning to that night when I saw Clara standing silently in front of the refrigerator. I had no idea what they were concealing, or what they might do if I uncovered it. A part of me just wanted to get in my own car and drive far away. Another part of me told me I was being foolish. When they finally drove off, I wasted no time. I hurried down the steps, turned on the light, and began to look through their belongings. Yes, it was an invasion of privacy, probably not allowed. But if I ever wanted to feel secure in my own home again, I needed some understanding of why they were acting so strangely. There were many odd things about their living space. All their sleeping cots were perfectly made, as if they had never been slept in. Most of the surfaces were covered in a thin layer of dust. I could tell the small television hadn't been used in a long time. It wasn't even connected. There were no personal communication devices or charging cables. No portable computers or tablets, just a collection of sealed containers and unused furniture. I did find an older instant camera. It looked quite dated. I began examining their containers. Just clothing, it seemed. All variations of what I had already seen them wear. Identical sets of shirts, trousers, dresses, and shoes. At least 4 containers worth. One container was filled with small personal items, like simple jewelry, hair accessories, and basic toiletries. Another contained a few decorative objects and trinkets, small ceramic figures, framed generic pictures, and some dried flowers. I took my time, carefully returning everything to its original place. It was peculiar, but there was nothing obviously incriminating or truly unnatural. Still, I remembered what the young couple had mentioned about a crate that moved. I couldn't see anything resembling a crate, that is, until I turned to leave. Right beside the steps, near the small, unused bathroom area, was a large, dark plastic storage bin. It was the kind of thing that could easily blend into the background, as if it had always been there. Yet, I distinctly remembered not owning such a container. It looked worn and scratched, like it had been around for many years. And perhaps I was imagining things, but it seemed to be shifting slightly, vibrating. Something was pressing against the sides, making faint plastic sounds. There was a noise coming from inside, like a low, rumbling sound forced through a narrow opening, a faint, rhythmic clicking. It caused the container to subtly shake and rattle. I froze. I hoped it would stop. I held my breath and waited for it to become still. I slowly made my way back up the steps. As I turned the corner and the container was no longer in view, I heard the lid of the plastic bin pop open. The sounds became clearer. I heard a muffled growl, the pitch rising and falling slightly, like someone clearing their throat in a strange way. Then something thumped softly on the ground inside. I stopped completely. I tried to identify the sound. It was like a small animal moving around, a soft scraping noise. And then something began moving towards the steps, quickly. An instinct told me to flee. I ran up the steps. I only glanced back briefly as I pulled the access door shut behind me. I only saw it for a split second. Something dark, with a single bright spot reflecting the light. Its texture looked rough and uneven. There were small, dark protrusions, and what looked like tightly stretched material. It emitted a low, continuous hiss. As I slammed the access door closed, I heard a vehicle pull into the parking area. It had been less than 30 minutes. Maybe they had intended to catch me. I heard them enter the main part of the house and head directly towards their living space. Meanwhile, I was in my room. I was quickly packing a small bag with a change of clothes and a few personal items. The moment I heard the access door close firmly, I headed for my car. As soon as I got in, I saw them step out of the house. All 3 of them stood there in the parking area, just looking at me, and right beside them was a medium-sized brown dog calmly sitting and watching. I didn't say a word. I simply drove away. I had to get away and try to understand what I should even do. I considered going to the authorities, but there was no rational way to explain what I had just seen. What could they even do? Ask them to leave for having a pet? There was nothing in the rental agreement about animals. I had no real evidence of anything truly wrong. I decided to spend the night at a small hotel just outside of town. I needed time to think and to sleep without the unsettling feeling of something strange residing below me. I couldn't erase the image from my mind. That dark, undefined shape, like something trying to mimic a small creature. I checked into the hotel and got a room on the ground floor. I got into bed, turned on the television, and looked at my phone for a while. I could feel myself starting to relax for the first time in weeks. But every time I thought about my house and that family, I felt my heart rate increase. I remember a soft tapping on the door. I must have briefly fallen asleep. I hadn't turned off the television or brushed my teeth. I just woke up with an unpleasant feeling in my stomach, that something was terribly amiss. I had closed the curtains, so I couldn't see who was outside. My thoughts raced, but I tried to consider more logical explanations. Maybe it was just hotel staff, or a manager checking on something. Then the tapping came again, this time accompanied by a voice. It was Sophie Miller, saying they just wanted to talk. I didn't respond. For a few moments, I carefully got out of bed, trying my best not to make any sound. There was no way they didn't know I was in there. They knew, and they wanted something. And whatever it was, I did not want to discover it. I quietly moved to the back of the room as the doorknob began to turn slowly. I could hear Sophie again, telling me to open the door. This time, her voice sounded deeper, more resonant. I quickly pulled open the curtains to a window facing the back of the building. I thought I might be able to climb out, but as soon as the curtains parted, my heart skipped a beat. Right there was Samuel, the father himself, just inches from the window, standing still with his plain gray jacket, a fixed smile on his face. He tapped lightly on the glass. "Would you mind opening up?" he asked. "It won't take long." Again, I looked more closely, and again I could see small details that were just off. A slight unevenness around his mouth that hadn't been there before. One eye seemed a fraction smaller than the other. I thought his hair looked a little too neat, almost artificial, like he had quickly tried to appear normal. There was another tap at the door, another tap at the window, soft voices from the front and the back, maybe even from the room beside mine. Small voices, slightly deeper voices, uneven voices. I had to escape. I pulled the front curtains aside to see how many of them were waiting at the main door. All 4 of them were standing there. Mother, father, daughter, and the brown dog. I looked at the Samuel by the back window. I was trying to convince myself I wasn't imagining things. There were 2 fathers, and neither of them looked quite right. Further down the walkway near their car, I saw 2 more children who resembled Sophie, both looking slightly incomplete. An odd tilt to the head, a strange expression. One had a patch of very short hair. I saw another Clara step out of the hotel office. This one had a stiff arm and a blank expression. I was surrounded. I held up my phone as if it were a shield. "I'm calling for help," I said. "Leave me alone." "That would be inconvenient," Samuel said calmly. The doorknob rattled again, more forcefully this time. I could feel my pulse quickening, my breathing becoming shallow. I looked back and forth, seeing the Samuel at the back window trying to figure out the latch. Only now did I notice that one of his hands looked slightly too large, the fingers too long. "How about a compromise?" Clara suggested. "Something beneficial for everyone." "What on earth are you talking about?" I said, backing into a corner. "Go into your bathroom, take a small piece of paper and hold it for a moment. Then release it out the window." Clara's voice remained even. What? I couldn't fully process what I was hearing. The words were there, but they didn't quite connect. "We will need a new form," Clara stated. "You will suffice." "You're not taking me," I retorted. "Oh, we will leave you undisturbed, and you will leave us undisturbed," Clara continued, "because if you do not, individuals who resemble you might begin to behave in ways that cause concern. This way, we can all go our separate ways. You will never encounter us again, and we will not bother you." I tried to make sense of it. They were going to create a likeness of me, just as they had with that dog and with that family. There would be someone looking like me out in the world. Something unnatural. But what other option did I have? I went into the bathroom and held a small piece of paper. I let it fall and moved to the window. The family stepped back slightly. I opened the window and let the piece of paper drift out. Clara picked it up and looked directly at me. With a quick motion, she placed the paper against her face and pressed it down. Her features seemed to shift subtly. Her smile became slightly wider. Underneath, there was just a faint rippling, like heat rising from pavement. It took her a few seconds to settle. She adjusted her hair slightly. She paused. She nodded, and when she looked back at me, she did so with my own eyes. She spoke with my own voice. "Thank you," I heard myself say. "I believe this will be a suitable arrangement for all of us, don't you think?" I couldn't reply. I couldn't think clearly. I simply closed the curtains and stumbled backwards. I heard a vehicle move outside. I heard rustling in the bushes behind the hotel, and from a distance I could hear my own voice one last time. "We will be gone by morning," it said, "but we are never truly far away." I heard a car drive away, and I just stood there. The next morning, they were gone. The ground level was empty. They had even left a polite note. Attached to it was an instant photograph of a happy family. A mother, a father, a daughter, and a friendly neighbor, one who looked exactly like me. Are they watching me? How many forms do they possess? I've wanted to just forget this ever happened, but it's becoming increasingly difficult. Every so often I see someone who vaguely resembles them. A Samuel with a different colored shirt. A Clara who looks a bit younger. Photos of school events with a Sophie, but with different glasses. And a few weeks ago, an acquaintance mentioned seeing me at a local event. The only problem is, I wasn't there. I've considered relocating somewhere very distant, but first, I just need to share this. I need someone to believe the real me, and not the me you might encounter elsewhere.